Now we've looked at variables in some detail, and now we're going to go on and look at arrays, or arrays as some people pronounce them. Arrays are a collection of variables, essentially, so they allow you to store more than one value in the same variable or the same object. So when I give you an example, that will make a lot of sense, or a lot more sense, I hope. So we define them in exactly the same way. So we just use var, and then ARR is often what is used as is short for array. And then to define our array, or to set it to a certain value, we use square brackets, and then we separate the values by commas. So that, for example, is a simple array, or array, which contains the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can see it there. So why might you want something like that? Well, let's say you've got an application like Facebook, and you want to store all of the users' posts. You don't want to have a different variable for every post. It makes a lot more sense to have a single variable, which might be called posts, and then contain the values of each individual post with that. Then you can do things like loop through the array and display all of the posts to the user, or search them to find a particular post, or something like that. So there's lots of uses for arrays, and we'll use them throughout the rest of this course. So what sort of things can you do with arrays? Well, you can, for a start, get the value of a particular variable within the array. So let's say I wanted to access the third variable along. Well, you might think that I go for array 3 because I want the third variable in the array. That would make sense, but unfortunately that's not right. You can see that that actually gives you the value 4. And that's because by default all arrays start their numbering at 0. So this is the 0th item in the array. So if I use array 0, that will give me a 1. If I use, there it is. If I use array 1, that will give me a 2, etc. So if I wanted to get to the 4, for example, what would I do? I would say 0, 1, 2, 3. So I will use array 3, 3 to give me the number 4 in this particular array. So that's a common newbie mistake, that you think I want the 4th value in the array, so I'll go for array 4. That's not the case. You always start your numbering at 0. So what other things can we do with arrays? Well, we can append to them. So let's say that we've created our array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we want to append a value on the end. Then we just use ARR dot append, and then number 6. And that will add a 6 on the end. So let's just display the ARR variable. And that should show us now that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. So we've appended an item to the end of the array. Now removing items from arrays is slightly more complicated. We've got a few different options which you can look at in the auto predict. If you type ARR.remove and then start typing remove, we can remove all, which will just empty the array. We can remove at index. So let's try that one out. If I remove at index 2, for example, quick question for you, what number will that remove? The answer is the 3. It will remove the 3 because the 3 is in the index number 2. So let's just check. Remember, we start indexing at 0, so we've got 0, 1, 2. So at index number 2 is 3. So that should give us 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. There we go. So we've removed at an index. We can also remove the last one, which is often a useful thing to do. If you want to just remove the last one that you've added on, then let's have a look. And that should give us, well, you work it out, what array are we going to have left once we've removed the second index and the last? It's 1, 2, 4, 5, because we've removed the 6 and also the 3. And finally, we can remove a range. So let's say, for example, I wanted to remove the two middle ones, so the 2 and the 4. So that's the one with index number 1 and index number 2. So there are a number of different ways to enter ranges, but the most simple is to use ... So ... means remove everything from the first element up to the second. And you can see it's removed the two middle ones, and we're left with 1 and 5. Now, a couple more things to show you about arrays before we move on to dictionaries. The first is just to point out that you don't need to have variables all of the same type inside an array. You can have, for example, 1, 2.3, and Tom. That's perfectly fine. So you can have an array which is made up of variables with different types. So integers and doubles and strings. No problem with that. Normally, however, we do normally keep our arrays to have only a single type of variable in them. We can also have empty arrays, and you do that in much the same way that you create an empty string, and that is by specifying the type. So use a colon and then you specify the type that you want within that. So if you're going to create an empty array, you do need to specify the type. And then, of course, I could not append something else to that wasn't an integer. So if I tried to do that, for example, it won't let me because I've already specified that this array is going to be full of integers, and so it won't let me put a double in. So that's a brief introduction to arrays. What's the difference then between an array and a dictionary? Well, let me show you. We usually use DICT for potentially obvious reasons as our abbreviation for dictionary. And the difference between an array and a dictionary is really that an array is ordered and a dictionary is not. So how does a dictionary work then? So maybe I want to create a dictionary with lots of information about myself. And if I wanted to do that, I might want to set my name equal to Rob. So name is a string, as is my name. I might then want to set my age to be equal to 34. And I might want to set my gender to be male. Whoops, and I need to put quotes around gender there because that's a string. So that just allows me to access information in a way that might be more useful. So if I wanted to access my name there, I would use DICT and then name in square brackets and quotes. Now we will get a slightly interesting result there. It won't just return Rob, it'll return optional Rob. Now this optional is a variable type that we have met before, and we saw it in the cat years video when it was a variable that may or may not have a value. And the reason that it may or may not have a value is because at this point in the code, the Swift doesn't know for sure whether DICT name will have a value. If, for example, I put named, then it won't have a value and it will actually return nil because there's no value for that. So if I want to get rid of that optional there, I have to force unwrap it. And can you remember how we do that? I hope you do. We just use the exclamation mark. And that forces Swift to return a value. It says, I know for sure that DICT name does indeed have a value. So you can, of course, make Swift get very cross with you and say, I know for sure that named has a value, but it doesn't, and you'll just get nasty errors. So bring that back in, and all is well. So how do we add values to dictionaries? We don't use append. All we need to do is just add them manually. So let's say I wanted to add my hair color. And I wanted to say that that was brown. That's all I would need to do. And notice I have spelled color with a U. It's up to you whether you do that. But that's how you add a value to a dictionary. You don't need to use append or anything like that. Of course, you can change values. So if I wanted to say DICT age for next year moves up to 35, I just do that. And we've got this sum here because of the optional situation, returning the value. Interestingly, Swift does allow you to change the type of the variables within the dictionary. So if I wanted to change that to old, for example, then it doesn't have a problem with that. It can change from an integer to a string. There are ways to remove values from dictionaries, but they involve creating an array which links to the dictionary and then removing the item that way. So that's a little bit complicated. I'm not going to go into it here. The easiest way really is to just set it to nil. And then it will exist in the dictionary, but it will have a value of nil, so it won't return anything. So if you want to effectively remove a value from a dictionary, the simplest way is to do that. Feel free to have a Google of removing values from dictionaries in Swift, and you'll see the more complicated ways to do that. But I'm not going to introduce you to that now because I think that'll just confuse things. The last thing I want to show you is a slight complication if you want to include a dictionary value in a string. Then it's actually not as straightforward as you might think. So if I create my string, let's say I want to say my name is Rob, you would have thought I could do something like my name is, and then add DICT name. But it doesn't like that because of this confusion with the quotes there. We've got quotes for the string and we've got quotes for the dictionary name. So there are a couple of ways around this. One would be to create a variable called name and set that equal to DICT name, which is fine, but notice we can't just pop name on the end like that because this isn't exactly a string. It's what's known as an object. So what we need to do is bring it into the string like that. So include it rather than use a plus. Notice we do get this optional. So how do we get rid of that? Hopefully you know that by now. We put an exclamation mark on the end which says to Swift, it's okay, I'm certain that name has a value, you don't need to worry. Unwrap it and there it is. My name is Rob. Another way around it might be to set the variable name equal to the string name and then use DICT name. And that works fine as well. Pop in the exclamation mark to force the unwrap. Because this doesn't have any double quotes in it, we don't get the confusion, even though we're just doing something straightforward. Okay, so that's quite a lot of information to take in. I'm going to get rid of all this and then set you a challenge. The challenge is going to be to create an array with 2, 4, 6, 8 in it, and then remove the 2 and add a 10 on the end. So create an array with 2, 4, 6, 8, and then remove the 2 and add a 10 on the end. Good luck. I hope you managed it. It's fairly straightforward. So we create our array 2, 4, 6, and 8 in square brackets like that. And then we remove the 2. So array.remove at index, and the index is 0 because we want to remove the first one. And then we want to add a 10 on the end. So let's append a 10. And then we end up with 4, 6, 8, 10. Excellent. That was your array challenge. For your dictionary challenge, create a dictionary which contains your name and age, and then a sentence which says, my name is, whatever that might be, and my age is, and whatever that is. Good luck. Okay, let's create our dictionary. I'm going to call it About Me. And we wanted name. So my name is Rob. And we wanted age. And my age is 34. So very similar to what we had in the video earlier on. And then we want to include both of those in a sentence, which means we need to create variables for them. So you could do this either way round, really. I think I'll just say name is about me name, and age is about me age. And then we can just create a string, which is my name is, and then name, and my age is age. That's all well and good, except we've got optionals all over the place. I'm going to change that in a slightly different way to how we saved it before. We could put exclamation marks there and there, but I'm going to pop them there and there just to show you that that works fine as well. And then we've actually unwrapped it at this stage, which means that we can use name and age wherever we like without having to unwrap them again. Okay, I hope that's made sense for you and you've caught up a bit on what arrays and dictionaries are. I hope you're not feeling that things are getting too dry. We will be making an app in one more video's time, but before we do that, we're going to cover if statements. I'll see you there in the next video.